Hello and welcome to TCB360.com, your smart business network around the world. Welcome all those that are checking us out. If you're new to the show, here's how the game goes. I put my ears on and for about 3 seconds I can hear music. You can't, but you're going to actually have an opportunity to watch me record our special series show today, which is huge. It's about perseverance. It's about culture. Something exciting. Trust and believe. I'm working the board. Welcome, welcome, TCB 360 Smart Business Network. Hello, how are you? Leaders are learners. I'm Latanya Jr., your host, and it's time to learn. I tell you, when you hear it on the radio show, and I love my intro music. Have you ever met anyone that loved their music so much? It's short, it's sweet, it's powerful. Oh yeah. And what a show. What a show today. The month of December, as you know, if you're listening to the shows on a daily basis and you're checking out our calendars, every December I do special shows. And today is no less important than our show that we did earlier on Critical Moments. And I tell you, I'm still getting emails. I love it. I love that you love it. And I love that we all have a better understanding of critical moments and Bill Gates and all how it all happened, and missing that phone call or making that phone call really could be a life-changing experience. But we're going to take a little different turn today. I want to talk about something that we all absolutely must deal with, whether you're an adult, whether you have a family, or you're an entrepreneur, and that's perseverance. And I also want to talk about the root definition of culture. And we know a more modern definition of culture, but I'm going to intertwine it. And then I'm also going to give you a great Chinese fable to make you feel good, because I'm revving you up for 2011. Whatever you didn't do in 2010 that you should have done, I am doing everything I possibly can to light and ignite your passion, which is capable, I can do that, and you can do that. We do it together. We're going to calibrate and do it together and make sure that you get a bigger, better, profitable, sustainable business. How about that? But I want to start with a story. So sit back and just relax yourself. And the person I'm going to share this little story, I'm going to shorten it so we're not here for days, because I could talk about this subject for days, or this particular person. We hear and see his products on a daily basis. And I have to say, just 2 days ago, I read that his company is 70%, has a 70% profit increase from last year. But boy, did this person have to persevere, and did they have to go through some serious learning and get beat up. And this is a big guy. I'm about to tell the name, so just hold tight. Huge companies, one of our most innovative companies on the planet. But it took 20 years. This journey was 20 years long. And guess what? He was a mama and papa. Oh, yeah. And he was a mama and papa that didn't get it, that looked in the mirror, and that was his way of defining his purity. He had a huge ego, lots of challenges 20 years later. And I'm not saying it's going to take you 20 years. I just want you to learn from this beautiful lesson. And the person we're going to speak about today is Steve Jobs. Around the world, I would say most people know who Steve Jobs is. Steve Jobs is the head of Apple. Apple computers, iPad, iPods, iTunes. We're familiar with Apple, but it wasn't that way in the beginning. And he had not always been the leader of Apple, even though he started the business. So let me share a little bit of the backstory of Steve Jobs and why we have to consider and think about, if we were to look at his overall profile as a person. He's known to psychological experts as what they call a creator. And a creator is a person, other creators that we're familiar with is Thomas Edison, Walt Disney, who started Walt Disney World. And when you have this profile as a creator, what you tend to do is keep your head in the clouds and be very creative and have these big ideas and visions, but you have a tendency not to complete what you start because your strength is really in the creation part and not the implementation and follow through and blah, 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 blah. What great creators do, like Walt Disney, whose brother helped him, like Thomas Edison, who had a great staff in New Jersey, and Thomas Edison, he invented thousands, he has thousands of patents, but it wasn't until he got a unique sales team that closed the deal and allowed him to even innovate more, create more. And then we have Steve Jobs. And Steve Jobs had another buddy named Steve. And they're sitting down and it says, listen, this PC thing out here is really happening and we need to be a part of it. And so they came up with this company and the concept was, we'll name it Apple. Why Apple? Well, they really liked the concept of gravity and Sir Isaac Newton and the whole Apple concept. Now, here's the deal. Put my glasses back on because I think better with them. This thing called gravity and Isaac Newton was a cute idea, but he could not maintain the gravity in the Apple company. And for 20 years, he kept trying to leverage and leverage, and he slipped and fall, and it took him a moment, but his perseverance stayed with it. And I'm going to give you the definition of perseverance after I give a couple examples of how Steve Jobs became a billionaire, not once, not twice, but 3 times in his career. Get this, in order to be a billionaire 3 times in your career, you have to lose it 3 times in your career. So you have to lose all that in order to become that again. Does that How does that feel, small businesses? I want you to try to avoid some of these errors, but I want you to understand the importance of perseverance. So here's how it starts. 1976, you have Steve Jobs and his buddy Steve, and they come up with this concept of Apple. And Steve Jobs, he started out with this tenacity. That's what he demonstrated. Tenacity. He was resourceful. He was what that profile defined him as a creator. What he realized, though, that he needed to collaborate. And, that's not a new concept. We often find that small businesses stay much too long by themselves, much too long by themselves. And you know what? Often they got away with it. But the world we live in today, and the show we discussed a few weeks ago about a horizontal system and how horizontal systems work in this new middle world that we live in. And all of a sudden they say, well, I have to collaborate. Well, most will have to because of what it will cost to control a fair piece of the market requires that you collaborate. And what's great about it, your customers come along and all the people in this collaboration come along. Of course, you have to have the same brand essence. That's another show, but if you've been listening, you know what brand essence is. And what happens, it becomes almost like an equity share. You're doing it though with people, and you're being a solution and a tool and a solution to what all of these collaborative consumers need, right? Well, Steve Jobs was feeling the same thing. So he says, you know what? I need some collaborations. And I also need some investors. And let's go towards that direction. And he said in 1980, by the time he got to 1980, he says, we're going to be public. And they did just that. 4 years after they started this company, they went public. And the ideas kept going. And then Jobs says, we need to collaborate. So I'm going to negotiate with Xerox. And I'm going to see if Xerox would grant Apple access to some of their facilities. Let's say that. To some of their facilities, to some of their engineers, and so on, etc. And something happened. This wonderful little company on the side by the name of IBM. And if we're paying close attention, we discussed IBM, and IBM PC was brought to their company through Bill Gates. And then Bill Gates took the identical mainframe and created Microsoft. So you can imagine they're best friends. IBM and Microsoft. It used to be MS-DOS. It used to be called the dirty old software. That was the real name for it. I can't make this stuff up. And those two guys says, listen, we're not going to let this little Apple guy squeeze in. And lawsuits went to flipping and turning, and it was a big thing in the news. Long story short, Apple prevailed. They're public. They turn into $1 billion company. But here's where it gets very shady. Steve Jobs, 4 years into it, he takes his big hit. They're at $1 billion. That's okay money. Okay, to a small businesses, that's great money. But in the bigger scheme of things in this industry, that's small money. And you still owe quite a few investors a couple of $100,000. And of course, there's employees and so on, etc. There's something like 4,000 employees. And you talk about 4,000, I think 4,300 employees, and there's only $1 billion hanging out there, or a few $1 billion. So Steve Jobs says, listen, I don't care what happens. His board is saying, the board he put there, by the way, is saying, we want you to split this computer. We want you to sell software on one end. We want you to sell the PC on the other, and we split it. We have two channels of revenue. And he said, man, no way. No way, no how. I'm not doing it. I'm telling you, my gut feeling. Steve Jobs, when he works out of that gut, he listens to that voice. And I'm not going to do market research. I'm just going to listen to the gut. And what happens, people? Steve Jobs, the people he actually put in place, kicked him out of his own company, voted him out. I can't make this stuff up. Perseverance, kick back in. Let me give the definition of perseverance right now, because we have listeners all over the world, and I don't want anybody to miss this, because this is the big aha of it all. Whenever I say the word perseverance, I want you to think about this. The meaning of perseverance, it means to maintain a purpose in spite of obstacles, difficulties, or discouragements. One more time. It means to maintain a purpose. That's the big piece, a purpose. Not just to say, I'm still standing, but to maintain that purpose through all these obstacles and discouragements. Let's take the meeting to a second part, part B. It means to keep going, even though there are obstacles and other challenges you must have to continue to go through. So you have to maintain purpose, and you have to keep going, even though there may be more to go through. And that's why the world of business, when you say perseverance, Steve Jobs immediately pops up. They couldn't beat this guy down. Listen else what happened. So he leaves. He's voted out of the company that he started. And he says, you know what? All right. What I'm going to do is sell some of my Apple shares, and I'm going to take some more money from some investors. I'm going to cough up, get some more money behind me. I don't want to layman's it too much. And I'm going to purchase this company. And what he did was he launched a company by the name of Next. Next. He left Apple, he launched Next, and they provided, his idea was, listen, no market research, nope, I'm just out there. What I'm going to do is I'm going to create PCs for the education market. And it flopped. Lots of money went into it. It flopped. So now we're talking about flop number 2. Meanwhile, Apple's doing okay, but they're not doing great. They're losing literally. I think they were at a point where they were losing almost $1 billion. Yeah, about $1 billion. They had 7 million. Let me correct myself. And they were losing like $1 billion. They weren't making a big profit at all. So that he kept one share. He kept one little tiny share. He sold everything else because he needed the money for his new idea. And the new idea, Next, moving into education, it flopped. And you ready for this? When Apple, the company he started, the company that kicked him out, when they found out that he was going to start or had started a new business, they sued him. It's like a little fly. They just wanted to squash him out of the complete universe. But he persevered. He had a purpose. Through difficulties, he kept moving. Feels like something we all have to do, small businesses. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Let me tell you, Walt Disney, he has a great quote. You know, Walt Disney, Mr. Walt Disney from Disney World. His great quote was often be, when you can't get a job, you start your own business. I love this simple stuff. You know, so that's pretty much. Can you imagine who was going to give Steve Jobs a job? But okay, I'll start my own business. And then when he started it, it didn't do very well. But then he got sued. And what's interesting is Next only had 6 employees, and they would wear blue jeans every day to work. And here you have a company that had 4,300 plus employees that was suing them. I mean, come on. How much more does he have to deal with? Well, it wasn't over. He then tried to sell it. He says, you know what? Jobs sold all but, excuse me, a very small percentage. And he says, this thing called Next, it's struggling. He had used $250 million in investments funds. In the same year, George Lucas had a little small computer animation group he had owned, and Disney had rejected it. So he joined up with the great George Lucas. George Lucas was not as great as he continued to become over the years. And Walt Disney wouldn't even buy it. He says, listen, we'll sell it to you for 50% off of 15 million. He said, nope. Ross Perot, nope, won't do it. And so what happened is Jobs ended up negotiating with Lucas, and he purchased this piece of business for about $10 million. Jobs took this business, Steve Jobs, and he says, this word Next is not working. I am going to change the name to Pixar. Yeah, does that sound familiar? So he kept 92% of the shares of Pixar Next, or that he named Pixar. And in 1989, Pixar was losing over $1 million each month. Can you imagine? I have to tell you, and I don't want to miss this part because I think it's important. Not only did he get into educational computers with education, he actually tried to sell his concept to the healthcare industry. Neither worked. So now he has to figure out, I got to leverage something. I got to do something here. It is not happening for me. And by the way, Apple's not doing well. So it's not like my little one share that I have, I'm going to make any money. My last hope for now that he sees, because he's a guy to persevere, people. Can you imagine what it feels like to have $1 billion and lose it? I'm not talking about 50,000, but let's talk about $1 billion. We're talking about a whole different level and quality of living. You know, you have a 50,000, you can still stay in the same house, same neighborhood. You lose 100,000, you still stay in the same house and neighborhood. You lose $1 billion, life changes. You know what I mean? So this is what happens. Here's the fairy tale. This is what happens when you stay on purpose, when you understand the culture, and I'm going to use that word, and then I'm going to tell you where it derived from and what it means today. And it's going to help strengthen your self enrichment part of your business, your self enrichment part. So we're familiar with this thing called Pixar. And Pixar began as an image computer company working on medical marketing. And in 1989, they were losing a whole lot of money. And they continued to lose money. And $150 million he received when he sold some additional percentage of his Apple stock. And basically, on the rate he was losing his revenue at $1 million a month, he realized he was going to be back to zero within 2 years. So he's looking at being destitute within 2 years. Taking drastic measures, Steve sold a piece of the hardware size of Pixar. Now this is, listen, I'm on my last leg. I got to sell a piece of this. and he sold it just for several millions. And that doesn't mean anything when you owe investors 250 million and another 100 million. That's 300 million. So when you sell something for a couple of million, it's like giving somebody 2 quarters out of $1,000 that you owe them. Most people would have thrown in the towel. That's what my friend that's what my friends from Your Life, Your Legacy says. Most people would have thrown in the towel, but Jobs, he persevered, keeping the core team and looking for a way to make money in the animation talent. He persevered again. I'm not saying persevere this often. This is what it's suggesting. Persevered. And he sits down with Walt Disney World and they said, listen, we have a movie called Tin Toy. And it received an Oscar in 1993. And Disney has approved a full feature joint venture with Pixar on a new movie called Toy Story. So listen, this is his last straw. New movie called Toy Story, 1996. He owes a couple of $100 million, and it looks like things are going to work out. And what happened? The executives that had designed the deal had a helicopter accident, was in a helicopter accident, and they died. I mean, who would ever think? The people that are signing the contract and bought into it, would have a fatal helicopter accident? So he had to start all of his negotiations all over with Michael Eisner, who was head of Disney at the time. And it took some time. And several months later, they said, okay, basically, dog, man, quiet up. We'll do it. The deal's back on. And he's thinking, all I got to do is, if I could just make $100 million and I could pay some investors, right? And because we'll prove ourselves and then we'll get more deals, more animated movie deals. Long story short, the movie happens. It's called Toy Story. It is a blockbuster. It makes not 100 million, not 200 million, not 300 million. Hold on to your seat. It generates over 450 million in cinema and video. The stocks hit the roof. Steve Jobs is a billionaire again. It gets better, people. This 20-year journey moved from him becoming a billionaire again to Apple computers saying, guess what? We need you. What you own, we now need it over here. He said, you do now. Now, how many of you would actually go back and work for the people that kicked you out of your own company and sued you? How many of you are really that forgiving? Remember, they changed the culture of his company. He didn't. He didn't change. They changed the culture and they kicked him out. So let me give you the definition of culture. Culture originated from the Latin word cultivate. That's a fact. But over time, as words do, they change their meanings. And that's why it's important for us to be lifetime learners, because words change. And we have to change and use them and learn what the new definitions are. So now in today's society, this is what culture means. And I ask you later, I want you to think about what's the culture of your business. Culture now means excellence of taste in fine art and humanities, as known to high culture. That's one. A second one is, the second B part, is an integrated pattern of human knowledge, belief, and behavior that depends upon the capacity for symbolic, through, and social learning. And number C definition is the set of shared attributes, values, goals, and practices that characterizes an institute, an organization, of a group. And that would be the one we're talking about. C, part of the definition, culture. An attitude, values, goals, practices that's characterized in an institute. When we talk about brand behavior, brand essence, brand personality, brand characteristics, I didn't make these things up. It's a part of the identity of the core brand. It's what helps differentiate you in the marketplace. It's what makes sure that clients can also be attracted to you, and you not just spending all your money begging for people to be attracted to you, begging for people and inviting them, because you share the similar culture, and because of with your perseverance, it becomes an extraordinary value of the mind. It's a part of your value proposition. Look those words up if you're new to the show. If not, you can also look up under our industry definitions on tcb360.com. Some of these words have been shared more recently. And as a reminder, the site will be updated in the next 2 weeks also. Listen, people, this story gets better, and I'm going to finish this story up, and I'm going to share a fable with you. Here's what happens. Jobs, they say, come on back, Jobs. Apple say, come on back. The nerve. He said, okay, but I don't want this company. I'm going to sell it. He said, okay, we'll sell it. We'll purchase it. It's sold. They sold it for $377 million. Apple bought it from him, and then he was also regained his shares. He, I'm sure, gained more. He owns 1.5 million in Apple shares. When he took the rim, he brought back his culture, people. He persevered, and he brought his culture back into Apple. Apple now stood for something. His head reached the clouds again, clouds that um, Thomas Edison and those before him, Walt Disney, said it's the place where great creators lie. They're innovating. Innovation means always bringing something new that is worthy and workable, something that makes something better. That's what innovation is all about. Jobs soon after launched iMac. Need I say more? He then launched iPod and iTunes, and now the extraordinary iPad. Jobs needed to rely on leverage, a leverage structure. That's what he did. And it allowed him to enter the entertainment industry. It allowed him to make some natural steps, but they were giant steps. And I could go on, and here's what's very interesting. Jobs' net worth in 2005 was over $4 billion. I have no clue what it is now. In January 2006, Disney, having rejected the chance to purchase Pixar at 50% for $15 million, brought a transformed Pixar from Jobs for $7.4 billion in stock, making Jobs and Disney's the largest individual shareholder and billionaire for the third time. It feels good. You know, this is really like a biography for businesses. This is an entrepreneur. This is one of your brand friends. Yeah, this is what that's about. Can you see yourself when you get tired, frustrated? Now, Jobs made some big mistakes. They actually share here, I didn't share it with you, says, listen, if he would have only looked in the mirror and did some market research, if the first time around his culture, if it was communicated a different way, because we must get along with people, we're all connected, but it wasn't, and he clashed with the board he put into place. But then he put that board there, and on a hiring level, we hire people that has the same DNA as our business. If not, you have conflicts. You have less conflicts. You're still going to have some, but less when you share the same brand DNA. Look up brand DNA, our new viewers, if you haven't, or look at our industry definitions. Let me share this. A very wise fable. Can I call it a fable? What's a metaphor? No, this would be pretty much a fact, I think. That depends on where you're from. Okay, so here it is. Listen to this. The Chinese bamboo tree is planted after the earth is prepared. And for the first 4 years, all of the growth is underground. The only thing that's visible above ground is a little bitty bulb, a small sprout coming out of it. But then in the 5th year, A bamboo tree grows to be 8 feet tall. 8 feet, 1 year. This is a great metaphor for growth in a business because you have to nurture and plant. And I'm not saying it's going to take you that many years, but it will take you a certain amount of time to get to that place where you are fully planted and solid, where you're growing at this capacity. Just like Steve Jobs, how he began. They said that you have to be a principle-centered leader. We've spoken about that. I can't go back to everything, but a principle-centered leader to understand this metaphor. You must pay the price to prepare the ground. You must plant and seed, fertilize, cultivate, water, weed, and even sometimes there is a challenge before you see results. When you do those things, the metaphor of watering, weed, cultivating, plant, that's your research, planning, testing part of the business. Your organization's culture is the one competitive advantage that you cannot duplicate. It is your brand DNA, and no one else has it. It is your unique connecting point that differentiates you in the marketplace. And if you don't have difference, then there is no reason for one consumer versus the other to determine if your product is a tool to solve a problem they need. And that's what we all are to consumers or to even other businesses. They look and they says, you know what? They're a solvent. They have the tool, whether it's toothpaste, a wedding cake, it solves the problem for the consumer. How about that? Let me close by saying this, my people. I like when it says this. Capital can be bought, but the ability of your organization to cultivate effectively, you must put first things first. You must put first things first. A high trusted, empowered culture is always homegrown. You must come honest fair. You must come honest fair. And you must know who you are. Your identity will make you or break you. It's the same that's true with your family. Correct? The quality culture must be quality culture. It must be nurtured. Steve Jobs, he was nurtured. I mean, he had perseverance, but it moved to this guy really was clear about his attitude, his values, and his goal. He had a purpose. That's what made it purposeful because he was really clear. So when we titter-totter and we don't know if we should be doing better, we don't know if we have time because we know better. Ugh, I hate to even go there. If you knew better, you do better. You've heard the saying. It's a truth. It is a truth. Your Life, Your Legacy. One of my friends, one of my good books. I feel good. I don't know about you, but I feel good. I just want you to think about it. It's a big story, and it was a lot. But that's what we're doing right now in the special series. Jilting you, making you feel better. We simplify the journey to your greatness. That is my purpose. Absolutely. While I breathe, I hope, and I leave love in my footsteps. You know how I feel about you. If no one told you they love you today, I'm LaTanya Jr. I'm your brand friend. And big capital letters. I love you. LaTanya Jr., thank you for listening.